usually just puts money in, but I guess that works too. Just one each.
Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animated features not made by Disney. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and today I'm joined by a guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
What's up, guys? My name is Jonathan. I'm very excited to be on Octaviano's podcast. I'm a really big fan of his, and I'm also a really good friend of his.
All right, nice having you. So today we're going to be talking about a movie that, honestly, it's been years since I've watched. Granted, that's pretty much normal for this show, but this is one where I'm like, yeah, I pretty much had to really rewatch it because a lot of it I was just kind of blanking out on. Stuff that, I mean, I remember stuff from it specifically, but it's just like, it's a lot weirder to the point that rewatching it, I kind of felt like, am I watching the right version or not? And that would be Digimon The Movie. For those of you who maybe don't remember, because of course it really hasn't been that popular in years. Digimon was this other anime that came out around the same time that Pokemon came out. Some people called it a ripoff. I can see why. It's not that simple. Realistically, it has its own thing going on, but I can get the general idea of why. But yeah, like this movie was kind of made because of the popularity of Pokemon, because it was something where it's like, okay, we actually did have the material for it before, because this was like Fox Kids that did it. Like we had the material on it before, but unlike Pokemon where they actually had the movie, this one there was like, okay, let's just take 3 shorts that were already made in Japan, put them together and make it a movie. I don't know. Do you want to talk about this from each individual short, or do you want to go break all together?
No, I mean, yeah, you are right. It is like three. It's basically three different shorts put into one movie, but it flows so well. I think
Right.
you don't really think of it that way, because I've never even thought of it that way. But now, obviously, I just recently watched the movie too, and to be honest with you, throughout the entire time I've loved film. You know that, and it is still my favorite animated movie. And people catch off guard when I say that, because not many people have watched that movie. More people grew up being fans of Pokemon. Like you said, people consider it to be a Pokemon ripoff, and I don't really think of it that way. I think it's its own thing. I mean, I love the anime. I kept up more with Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and stuff like that because it was more popular. It was more popular around friends and stuff like that. So I was kind of always like that kind of weird kid inside that liked Digimon. But I mean, we could talk about we could break it down per short, talk about the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Right. Because, yeah, I mean, this was something that I was aware of years ago, just because I did remember. Okay, so this is just kind of a backstory a bit on this. 2 of these shorts, specifically the first one where it's like the past, and then when it's like a few years later, but before the final timeline, was directed by a Japanese director named, I believe it's Mamoru Hosada, who has done other movies. Like I know recently he came out with a movie called Belle. Haven't really seen it, but I've heard it's great. But the one that where it got me thinking about this was almost a decade ago. There was a movie that he had called Summer Wars, and a lot of what happens in the second short reminded me of stuff that happened in Summer Wars. So I was like, okay, this reminded when I was watching Summer Wars, I was like, this reminds me a lot of the Digimon movie. I got to look this up because it's very close, and I found out like, okay, so it's the same guy who made the movie. So that was kind of interesting. So yeah, they pretty much put it all together. I know there was some controversy regarding that, where apparently it's like, is it really the same thing if you're putting in a bunch of shorts? Because it's technically a 20-minute short, a 40-minute short, and then a 60-minute short chopped down to a 90-minute movie, which is crazy. But yeah, so going into the first short, it's pretty much the past. It shows you. I don't know. I could be wrong. Did they ever showcase any of this in the anime itself? I feel like they kind of brought it up, but not a whole lot.
I don't recall exactly, but I do. I think this is unique to the movie. I know that they bring into the movie obviously the 8 years prior, like from when it became the Digidestin. I don't think that part of like where the Digimon were battling in the middle of Japan. I don't think that ever surfaced into the actual animated series. I could be
Okay.
wrong. I haven't seen the animated series in who knows how long, but I think that that's specifically unique to the movie.
Okay. Yeah, because that's where I wasn't really too sure, because I feel like they might have done it, but then again, it could be wrong. But yeah, like, so it's the 8 years prior, and you see pretty much the main character of the original show, because there's like multiple series to this. Me personally, I only got up to the third series. After that, I completely lost track on Digimon. But yeah, like for that first series, like they had the main character Tai and his little sister Kairi, which is the main focus of this first short, where it's basically okay, they find a Digimon egg, uh, and it eventually grows into like this big kaiju, pretty much fighting another bird kaiju. It's a really well animated short, even though watching it again, I noticed like, okay, they're explaining a lot, and it's just because they're trying to connect it to the final thing, where it's like, okay, here's this guy named Willis who factors not whatsoever to this story, but it's, I guess it kind of gives it a bit of a connection to the ending.
I mean, it does kind of raise interest when as the because it's Kyrie that's talking, it's narrating the story,
Yeah,
and at the same time that they're receiving their first DGA that ends up turning to be out, Agumon and Greymon.
yeah,
Willis is in America doing the same thing with what will ultimately end up being the movie, well, the final short's antagonist.
yeah. This is where I noticed that there's some interesting choices that they make with the writing, because again, it feels to me like I'm like, okay, I'm not sure if I'm watching the right version, because at times I don't know if you've ever heard of abridged stuff like with anime,
Yeah.
where basically it's like, okay, let's take, like, I know they've done like Dragon Ball Z, it's one of the more popular ones, or Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's like, okay, let's shorten out a whole story and add in like funny lines and stuff like that. There's parts of that in here, like not to the point that it completely breaks it, but to the point where it felt a little weird. Like there's a whole bit where Agumon is running around in the street, and like a car like nearly crashes into him or something, and you hear like the drivers, like one of them mentions like, oh, did you see that? And the other guy's like, no, I'm asleep. And then the other guy goes back like, wait a second, you're the one driving. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that feels like an abridged thing. It doesn't feel like this is something made into it. I mean, it's funny. It's actually a funny line, but it's
And there is a couple of those in the movie. I was pointing that out earlier as I was watching the film. There, if you catch a lot of the like a lot of the dialogue, and mainly like from Ty, he did that. Like when they first got the egg, that's how he was talking about cracking the egg, or using it to play soccer. Then he talked about like having to his mom being mad about the what was it, the microwave or something his mom was mad about. But then he's like, oh, well, wait till mom sees the car.
yeah.
There's a lot of little lines like that are funny. Granted, I feel like that was put in more when it translated over to America, because the movies we watch, they have one-liners and stuff like that, and they're funny. It's comedy.
Yeah.
I don't know if that translated over in Japan, if that was in the original, because you know how translation is sometimes lost between countries. Our language is so different. So who knows? I've never actually seen the Japanese version of the movie.
Yeah, I've never seen it either. I'm willing to bet that a lot of that is just an American thing, because I remember like what I was saying earlier about like some controversy regarding how they cut it up, was that apparently they added in so many different things to it that I guess it was like the Screenwriters Guild or something. Like I know it was basically like, okay, look, you have to actually give some residuals or something like that to the voice actors, because a lot of this material is very different from just doing a typical dub that you would find with anything else. So I would have to imagine that it's a lot of changes in that respect. But I don't know. Like I don't mind it. It's definitely just an interesting thing, because you don't see it that often with stuff like this. And like I said, none of it is really bad. Like I honestly do enjoy a lot of that stuff. it's just going to be a little bit weird. But on the whole, that first part, the real standout to me is just the fight at the end when you see like the Greymon fighting the, I don't know what the name of the bird thing was. It Paramount? Is that what it is?
That's what it is. I know.
Some of these are.
If you look at some of the Digimon that they bring into the anime, and you just look at it, and you're like, that thing has a complicated name, and then you look at it, and it's really something simple as Paramon. You know.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and I don't know. I don't know if that's what it is in Japan. It could just be that we just translated it this way over here in America.
yeah.
But yeah, Paramount.
So Paramount, like the fight scene in that is very. I mean, it's very well animated. It looks like a really. I don't know. It's a really good depiction of like a kaiju fight in animation.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, just to compare to Pokemon, since that was what it was constantly being compared to. When it came to their movie, I do have some nostalgia for it, but realistically, when it came to a lot of the animation, it's pretty much what you would expect from the show, with maybe some advancements in like the coloring and stuff like that. Whereas this, compared to what I remember seeing in the cartoon, which I haven't seen in years, but I do remember at least the way they had looked, it really does feel more cinematic. Like it feels more like something that you would actually pay and go watch in a theater. So that stuff is impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean the animation I think is made quite well. It is different from what we're used to now. Animation has changed so much. And what is this, a 1999 movie? Early 2000s?
2000s, because I think from what I've read, the shorts that at least the first two were probably late 90s, but once we got it, it was by like 2000, 2001, made pretty much to cash in on the success of like the two Pokemon movies. Like that's honestly like what they mentioned. Like they made a success, so let's try doing it with our thing.
And I mean, there's always that whole Pokemon versus Digimon, and which one's better and which one copy who. Honestly, as a fan of both, because I do enjoy both,
Right.
I don't really look at it that way. They're both good movies. I mean, I love Pokemon the first movie, but Digimon, oddly enough, has like I don't know, it just grabbed my attention. The first time I ever saw it, I was a child, and as I've gotten older, I've seen it periodically through my life. Just randomly, I'll sit on my bed and just watch. I'll look it up on YouTube. Oddly enough, too, I couldn't find it on any of the streaming services. I had to watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I couldn't find it in streaming service either, so I had to go on YouTube. I was like, because of course, when you mentioned that you wanted to do this, it was over a week in advance. I did want to at least watch it as legal as possible. Like, not that watching it on YouTube is bad, realistically, especially with something like this where it's harder. But I did want to, watch it in the best way possible to get that good quality. And yeah, there's no streaming services, and the only thing I could do was buy a DVD on it, which I didn't go for just because all the prices I see on it are north of $40. So I guess because I don't know because from what I read, it was a financial success, especially because they didn't have to waste too much money on changing it. But I guess it's a mixture of the brand is not as known as it once was. Technically, it's now a Disney movie because Disney bought off Fox, so it's not part of their whole library, and it all depends on what they're wanting to promote. And I don't know, maybe there is some legal troubles, considering that it technically is 3 separate shorts that were cut together in one movie. But yeah, it's become a lot harder to find. So go watch it on YouTube. No one's taking it down, because from the video that I saw, it was like 5 or 6 years that it had been on there. So
honestly, we probably watched the same one, because it's when you look up Digimon the movie on YouTube, it's the very first one that comes up.
Yeah, because I know there was a couple of different ones. I went with the first one that I saw, which I think is a little zoomed in. I'm not too sure because it feels like it's a little zoomed in, but I don't know. I can't really compare it since I haven't seen the original version. Well, pretty much I haven't seen this movie as it was originally released since it came out.
Yeah, I don't. Honestly, looking back now, I don't know where I could have even watched the original movie unless I saw it like on like Kids WB or something, because that's that's
Probably. I mean, I remember seeing it on. Yeah, it was definitely on cable. I mean, I don't know. I mean, granted, this was way back when the family was kind of stealing cable, so I could have seen it on Stars or something.
Oh, man. All right.
I mean, they can't do anything about it. I ain't doing it now. It's in the past.
That's funny. No, I mean, I don't know, but like you were saying, like the movie, it holds up really, really well. The animation is really well done. I mean, it would have probably been better to watch a DVD version,
Yeah.
but the quality.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
The animation was done very well.
Yeah.
So what? I'm trying to figure out now. What parts of the first short, I guess, because we're talking about shorts. Which one stood out? Like, what part stood out to you the most?
I mean, like I said, the whole battle between Greymon and Paramon, that's to me the best part. Like of all the stuff that I've seen in that whole short, probably even the movie, if I'm being completely honest, that's the sequence that has stood out to me the most from since I first saw it as a kid. Like, of course, there's other stuff like when you're getting like the kind of kid shenanigans with Kyrie and Ty kind of playing around with the little baby version of like Agumon or whatever in the streets, and then of course in the house. It's cute, but yeah, it's that fighting. It's really impressive to look at, and I've never seen another anime kind of do a similar thing when it comes to just like having giant monsters fight. Like it really does capture that feel of like a kaiju movie really well.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about with you?
Honestly, it's probably just the fact of looking back to the original animated series, seeing how small they are and what they experienced in order to become the Digidestin.
Right.
Because I mean, the fight was awesome. That's kind of what the anime is for. It's fighting.
Right.
But like just the small tidbits of storytelling that it does to build up to the fight. Like knowing that that the original Digidestin are watching this fight all simultaneously at the same time.
Yeah.
They're all little kids, and they're more like 5, 6 years old watching this. And they eventually become the Digidestin. That's kind of what I like about the movie. It's just the storytelling of it.
Which
built into like kind of like the second short.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I think this movie transitions really well and kind of smooth. I mean, in my opinion,
Right. Now, before because I think we can move on to the second short at this point, but before doing that, I just want to point out, because this is a thing I remember, but they didn't actually have it in the YouTube video that I saw it in. Do you remember the little short that played in front of this movie?
Yes.
The Angela Anaconda or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad that was not a part of it, because one, I don't really want to delve into that too much, but two, it's probably the ugliest looking fucking cartoon I've ever seen.
Look, I wasn't gonna bring it up because it's I mean, it's just a little short, but it's not part of the movie. But I mean, now that you bring it up, yes, it was awful.
I mean, the only reason why I bring it up is because technically, at least according to like the Wikipedia page, it is counted as a part of the movie, because I guess just because and then again you have to consider that this was has not really been re-released in any kind of way, I guess, official way, but I guess when it came out in theaters, that played right in front of it. When it came out in home video, that played right in front of it. So even like early TV showings, which I'm like, yeah, I do remember seeing it even on cable, they would have that right in front of the movie. Now, granted, I don't want to delve, like I said, too much into it. I just wanted to point it out just in case if anyone listening to this brings it up, like, oh, what about the Angela Anaconda thing? Which my only thought is it wasn't on the thing that I just resaw, and more importantly, it's an ugly fucking cartoon. That's all I can really say on that.
Again, I was going to bring it up. I don't think it was that important, but okay. If it's part of the movie, then it's part of the movie, and that's a horrible part of the movie.
I mean, realistically, the only reason why I bring it up, and I was almost forgetting it, is like I said, I don't want anyone, listening to this, like even if it's like from like 5 years from now, like, hey, you didn't talk about this thing. It's like, well, I just because it wasn't the thing that I resaw, but it came back up, so I was like, okay, there you go.
If anybody listening points this out and you make a big deal of it, we'll come back in a few years and do a 3-minute podcast. And we'll make it as an add-on to this podcast.
So
right.
The second short of this is pretty much like 4 years later, 4 years before the ending of this. Once again, we get Ty. Kyrie pretty much fades into the background of this one. I mean, it's explained why she's like at a party or something.
Yeah.
So most of it is Ty. I'm forgetting the Izzy, and then you got the other two, Matt and TK. Though TK you kind of forget about just because Patamon pretty much is just there to get his ass kicked. I mean, realistically, all the characters get their asses kicked at one point or another, but even, like, Izzy's Digimon at least kind of helps out early on, so it's kind of cool. So in this one, like I said, if you've ever seen the movie Summer Wars, it's kind of similar to that. If you've never seen Summer Wars, but I've seen Digimon the movie, I recommend watching Summer Wars. It's a really good movie, especially because you'll be reminded of this segment, because it's pretty much a virus. Digimon is like attacking the web, and it eventually leads into like a worldwide disaster with like nukes and all the stuff. It's kind of crazy in that regard, but it's still cool. I like the designs of the virus Digimon, especially as it becomes Diaboromon. But this is where I kind of started to notice where they might have added in stuff from and cut around it more than the previous short, because every time the Digimon Digivolve in this, it's the same animation that they're using in the show, and I don't know if that was always like in the original Japanese version, or if it's a thing that they added in this just to kind of make it look like the show.
I'm honestly not even sure. It could be that they just took a piece of the show and just added it onto the movie. I mean, either way, that's the way they digivolve anyway. So if it saved them time, then I mean,
yeah. No, I mean, I'm not complaining. It's just
yeah. I mean, it's something pretty obvious that you can see. Although I did want to point something out. I mean, you're just a little bit older than I am, like by a year or so. But watching this movie kind of made me feel just a tiny bit old, because look at the way they're dealing with Diaboromon. They're using dial-up. The are huge. It really reminded me of when we were kids.
With that, honestly, you'll notice a lot of movies and shows from that period doing this, and it's something that, yeah, it definitely makes you feel old once you watch it, because, just to kind of go on a small tangent, you get, like, I know around the time that this came out, there was also, like, the Rocky and Bullwinkle live-action movie, which in that one, there's, like, a whole, here's how we can truly get rid of cartoons from the real world, because it's like the whole Roger Rabbit thing. And it's pretty much by sending them to online, like to the internet or something like that. And there's even a scene in that movie where they showcase how the internet is, and I'm like, God damn, that is completely off from what we're doing now.
No, I know. As I was watching the movie, I just kept thinking, like, damn, I'm old. And I mean, I'm not that old. I'm going to be 27 in a few months. And yet, looking back, like the big computer, the really huge computer that Izzy was bringing down that monitor. Like you look at monitors now, they're so thin, you know.
Yeah.
It's weird because I don't know how familiar. Again, I don't know how familiar you are with Digimon. They released. I don't remember when it was. It was a couple of years ago, but they like re-released another anime movie. I think it's like a six-parter. It's called I think it's called Digimon Adventures.
Okay, yeah, I'm not aware of that one.
But that's I think that's way more updated now, and yet the anime style isn't that different. I think the anime style for Digimon itself is kind of like it kind of in its own little wheelhouse, you know. Like if you look at the animation from like Dragon Ball Z, you know, from when we were younger, like you from Dragon Ball Super, it's a lot more updated. It's a lot more crisp.
Yeah,
you know, it's a lot better. But the Digimon one, like there is improvement, but it's still like watching the Digimon Adventures kind of throws me back to watching Digimon the first movie, you know.
but yeah, like weird thing about that is like with the technology. Yeah, like that is also one of the weirdest parts in the movie because there's a whole bit where it's like, okay, because a lot of people are emailing them, it's slowing down like their two Digimon that are fighting against the Aboromon, which I'm like, okay, you know, that's kind of a neat idea. I mean, it's weird, but I kind of get where the logic is in that. But then there's a whole bit where, you know, and even the movie kind of says like, and then somehow Tai went into the computer with more Greymon, and pretty much you see like, okay, I guess the love that people were sending through the emails is what kind of revives both War Greymon and Metal Garurumon back to fighting. And then they win the battle by having Izzy like, wait a second, I could forward those emails to Diaboromon to slow it down, which I'm like, okay, I get the logic right there. It's weird, but I get the logic right there. But when it comes to reviving the two, I'm like, wait a second, wasn't it just slowing them down? Like, how does that revive them? Like, okay, I don't know. It's definitely a weird bit, but whatever.
I mean, I'll go back to, I guess I could put in some just tiny bit of logic in there. It's a children's cartoon. I mean, children some hope, you know, tell them that love fix it all.
I mean,
you know, when you got two giant monsters dying and you just, you know, shed some tears and love them a little bit, they can be revived. You know, that's what this movie's trying to teach us.
But I don't know. It is a weird bit in the movie. But I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting. For a second, like the emails are slowing them down. Now they're actually helping, but now it's slowing the bad guy down.
They had a problem. They found a solution, and they made it the bad guy's problem. I mean, you know, it worked out at the end. They won. That's what's important is that they won.
I don't know. Is there much else that
in part two?
Huh?
What else stood out to you in part two? So, like I said, look to me, like we already talked about the animation on the first part. It kind of transitions the same way throughout the rest of the movie. That second part, just having all the old stuff, all the just kind of throwing you back to 2000.
Yeah,
that's what stood out to me because it's the same thing. It's storytelling and then it's the fight at the end. You know.
Yeah.
That's kind of the same transition you get in the second part of this. The movie is the second short film, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
What about like for you? What stood out in that?
I mean, okay, so just to be clear on it, the tech, yes, it's definitely something that made me like, okay, yeah, that's from a long ago. Doesn't make me feel too old. I'll be completely honest. When it comes to stuff that makes me feel old, it's like the weirdest things. Like, I guess like not so much in terms of the age of the technology, because I'm like, well, there's a lot of movies that get made where it takes place in the past, so who gives a shit? I guess it's just some of the slang and stuff like that. But realistically,
Yeah.
not really that much that made me feel old in this. I mean, the only other thing that I would say stuck out to me that I don't think I've mentioned so far is just how over the top it kind of gets in the real world. Like, you of course have like, okay, so bad Digimon, it's running around, so we gotta stop it. Fine, whatever. Eventually, like nukes get involved. You know, there's like a whole lot of stuff like in the traffic, like traffic lights are going all over the place. The bank is going down, all that stuff. So I'm like, it's kind of insane seeing that kind of stuff and realizing that well, it might have been like at the time just some kind of like fantasy thing where it's like, okay, you know, the computer's ruining everything. It feels like that's something that would be truer now than it would be back then, with how much more is tied to pretty much Wi-Fi networks and all that stuff now. So I don't know. It's crazy short. And again, if you want an expansion on that kind of thing, go watch Summer Wars. It's pretty much this short without the Digimon. It's also a coming of age story, and there's like a whole romance thing going on. Really good movie, but yeah, like if you love this, I definitely would recommend watching that just because it's a very similar thing.
All right. Now, but before we step into the third part, the final part of this, I did want to bring something up. The soundtrack for this movie.
So
the soundtrack for this movie, again, it's an opinion.
Yeah.
Everybody can think whatever they want. The soundtrack for this movie is a banger. I like this soundtrack a lot. You know,
So I'll say this much. I do agree. A lot of the songs are really good. I find some of the placements a little weird, but then again, they never really last too long. So I'm not going to complain about it. That's the only thing I'll say about it. But I mean, again, it's one of those things where it's like, well, it was, dubbed over for us. So it kind of makes sense that it would be a little weird in places.
yeah, sure. I mean, it is a little odd some of the places that they chose to put each song. Like at the end of the fight, with the Aborum, they put the impression that I get by the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones as Ty and Izzy are kind of like throwing up over the what is the railing on their apartment.
Yeah.
And so you just hear a snippet of that. You got Smash Bounce All Star.
I'll get into that one.
Oh, okay. I bet you will. You got bare naked ladies in there.
Yeah.
It's a very 2000 soundtrack. If you just listen to the soundtrack itself with no context whatsoever, like if I were to play this for you blinded and told you point this out what movie this came from, I don't think anybody would be able to piece together the Digimon movie. So all these songs, they work in the movie really well. I think, in my opinion, and they're all very weird, but I think they go really well with the movie.
I mean, yeah, like I wouldn't really complain about it. It's definitely weird. Like you were saying, like with your example with the tie, like throwing up over the railing or whatever. But yeah, like with the All-Star, I'll get to that because that's actually one of those bits that I was just like, okay, so that's what we're doing. But anyways, we're getting into the third short, which is pretty much what this whole thing was building up towards, which was with the Willis kid, who basically, like at the start of the movie, they mentioned like, okay, so as Tai and Karu were dealing with their Digimon, so was he, and then apparently he's the one that unleashed like the virus in the second short of the movie. So it's pretty much a whole thing where it's like, okay, so he has two Digimon. One of them has pretty much become corrupted. It's hunting him down, and it's constantly telling him to go back to the beginning. He thinks it's like, okay, go back to where they first met. It eventually is like a whole time traveling. Not really time traveling, more like a time reversal, I guess. I don't know what would be the actual term on that, but it's pretty much like, okay, he's reversing time. And in this one, they have like the second series characters, which I'll be straight up, I'm not the biggest fan of the second series. When it came to Digimon, I preferred the characters from the first series. So the fact that a lot of those characters from the first series are sidelined for this movie, while you got the second series characters, actually are there for most of that final short. That kind of bothered me when I first saw it, just because I was just like, I preferred like the original team.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Davis, I'll be completely honest, but whatever.
To give you I don't know, I'll be your opposite actually. Growing up, I enjoyed the second series. Actually, I loved it. With the original series, you get the Digidestin with their Digivices, and that's basically the only way that the Digimon could Digivolve. And the second series, you're introduced to the crests, and then with their Digivices as well, kind of giving you a different way of Digivolving. The original would have been better to have, cast throughout the whole film. But seeing the second generation, Kai's little sister, TK, a little grown up, or not grown up, but a child.
Okay, you might want to repeat that because it's cutting off a little bit on the sound right now.
Oh well, I was just saying that the second series just has like Kyrie, just older, and TK older. So I do like that it has just a tiny bit of the original cast,
right?
Translated into the second, because they still kind of go hand in hand. Like if you watch the second series, they do bring some of the original Digidestin into it. You just have kind of have your new kids that are doing the same things as you just have them doing the same things as the original cast.
Oh, okay. Okay. I guess. I didn't really. I don't want to say that I hated it because I didn't. I do get where you're coming from in terms of having the two younger characters and then the occasional appearances of the other ones, but I don't know. I still just don't really like the new characters that were added into it. I didn't really care for it. But what I will say is that of the three shorts, this is the one that gets butchered the most. From my understanding, because this was originally like a 60-minute short, so it's pretty much almost a whole movie on its own if you watch it in the Japanese. Because apparently one of the things that they cut out from this was like there's apparently a subplot where you actually do get the original Digidestin characters, kind of trying to figure out what's going on as well, but they end up getting captured by Kokomon or whatever the villain is on this one. So yeah. I'm like, okay, that's completely cut from our version. So I don't know.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, like apparently this was one that gets butchered the most of the three shorts because so much of it had to be cut down just to pretty much kind of give it some connection to the other stories. I don't know. With this one, again, you get some neat fighting sequences, so that's great. It does have one of the weirdest cuts in the whole movie where, I don't know, maybe it's the same in the Japanese version. I don't know. But there's a whole bit where like Willis is explaining to Davis, like, okay, this is why, this is all going on. This guy's chasing me down, all that stuff. And Davis starts crying because he's like, oh, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard. And Willis tells him, oh, it's not that sad. And you have Davis just automatically cheered off, like no reaction to his tears prior. Just like, okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, I do remember that.
It's definitely one of the weirdest bits. And again, when I saw that, I had to pretty much once again point out, okay, I'm not sure if I'm watching the action thing or if I'm watching an abridged version. But of course, it's the actual voice actor, so it's definitely got to be the version that I saw.
I think I think it would have been funny if we came to the podcast with one of us having watched the abridged version and one of us having watched the original version, thinking we saw the same thing.
Honestly, that was one of the things I was worried about going into this, is that I had watched that, and then you tell me like, "Oh no, what I saw was completely different," and I'd be like, "What the fuck?" See, I just
2 different movies, man.
like I opened up a link on YouTube and went with that one. Yeah, like apparently this is the most butchered one of the shorts. I don't know if it really would change my opinion if I saw the original version, but it is of the 3 the weakest part of the movie. Like just because the action is cool, I will say that much. But because within like the first 2 shorts, there's almost a complete story being told with them. I feel like this one's a little weird, especially because again, you are being introduced to like the second series characters who haven't appeared prior to this. So it's like, okay, of course you went out of the way to introduce this Willis character right from the very beginning. But then when it came to these guys, you introduce them like pretty much within the last 20 minutes of the movie. So it just feels a little weird, especially if you're coming at it from a place of, someone who's new to the franchise.
Yeah, there is a piece of this movie that does feel like it's I don't want to say rushed,
Right.
but it does feel choppy. Like you said, it is definitely the weaker part of the movie. So much so that when I rewatched this part, I didn't remember a lot of it.
Right.
So watching it recently, it made me just kind of like, oh damn, this kind of feels brand new to me, just because I don't remember so much. I remember the first part and the second part pretty well, but I don't know if that's just because of the fact that I love the original. Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty much on you with that whole thing because, like I could at least even having not seen this for who knows how long, I'm like, okay, the first short, I was before watching this, I was like, okay, I know it starts off with a whole bit with them as kids, with Agumon eventually fighting like this giant parrot in the street. I know that after that it skips a few years and there's a whole thing in the computer because again, like I mentioned, I ended up getting reminded of this through another movie that the director made. But with this one, I was like, okay, I know there's this whole thing about a kid that connects it all, and there's like this little chubby, like bunny-eared Digimon that comes along with him that eventually has like pants and like machine gun arms. But I don't remember too much beyond that, and that it's also the segment where they start focusing on like the second series because I guess at the time that was the version of the show that was running new episodes on TV. So it was definitely the weirder part. It's not horrible. I do think okay, just to kind of step aside on this a little bit. I know like the common consensus that a lot of people had, like critics at the time or from anime fans, is that in comparison to like say the Pokemon movie that had come out around this same time, which was just the first one with Mewtwo and the second one with Lugia, it is the better one of those anime movies, which I could definitely see why you would argue that, just because it's better animated and at least has an easier story to work with, even if you're not a fan of it. That being said, this is the part that will probably throw off most people into maybe even somewhat of a negative take on the movie, just because it completely goes off from what you had seen for like the past hour or so. Again, it's not necessarily bad. It still has the great animation, the great fight sequences, but it just doesn't work in the same way.
I do agree with you. It is definitely the weaker out of the 3 shorts. It just didn't have the same storytelling. Like I said, it does feel rushed. It does feel like they just kind of like they had a bigger part to show us. And, just to make time to make it fit or whatever. They chopped it up into pieces and kind of glued them together so that when they presented it, they're like, okay, this works. But I wouldn't say it's bad. I think the pieces that they did piece together make sense because it still kind of does make sense, and it does help that in the beginning of the movie and in the middle you do kind of get like a little bit of an explanation as to who Willis is,
Yeah.
and like so you do kind of that helps it at the end because what wouldn't have been told at the end of the movie got told in the beginning. If you were to have rushed this whole thing and not told us who Willis was or where the virus came from and stuff like that, and then you came to the third part, you would have absolutely no idea what you're watching because it wasn't explained.
But yeah, like, so just because it's still on mine, the thing that I wanted to mention with the All-Star is that this segment actually closes off on that, and it's a little weird because it's like, okay, so they killed off like the evil Digimon, but then they point out like, well, technically it wasn't really evil, it was just corrupted. And the good thing about Digimon, which is of course this is a thing in the anime, so it's not like something that they just made up in the movie just to bullshit a happy ending, is that yes, Digimon will come back over time, even if you kill them. And in this case, it was like, okay, so he comes back, he's friendly, and he's basically dancing and singing to the All-Star Smash Mouth. When I saw that again, like just like I've said before, it was just like, okay, am I watching the actual version of this, or am I watching some abridged version? Because this is just too damn wacky. But amazingly, it does feel weird that the Smash Mouth song does fit really well with the movement and everything, and it's just reminds me of, once again, just, which technically this makes me feel older than the computer thing that you had mentioned before, is that this was that period where All-Star was playing in everything, and it's still always weird because it's like most people nowadays just associate it as the song from Shrek. But then you see like, okay, no, this was playing it. The movie Mystery Man was playing it. Like almost any kind of big movie that was out at the time was playing All-Star or some Smash Mouth song. So it's, I don't know, it just makes you feel like, okay, so yeah, this is definitely something from like 20 years back.
Oh yeah, because another one, just like you mentioned right now, like with it being connected to like the Shrek movie, another song in the movie is "Kids in America."
Oh yeah,
oddly enough, I forgot that song was even in the movie until I recently saw it again. But every time I hear that song, it throws me back to the Jimmy Neutron movie. That's what I remember when I hear "Kids in America."
Yeah.
So it's kind of odd that it's weird. The songs that they chose for this movie are so weird that it works.
Right.
Like I said, if I were to blindly play you this soundtrack and I told you point out what movie this came from, I don't really think you'd be able to do that. Because it's not like all these songs were composed directly for the film. It literally just feels like they told somebody in the studio, go find some music because we need to finish this movie. And they just found the local, music head, and they're like, oh, hey, you, pick something up. Because like you said, like Smash Mouth's All-Star works at the end of the movie. The Digimon is dancing to it, and the movement is all cool and everything.
Yeah.
And it works. It's like, okay, it feels like it was picked out specifically for that. Like this was perfect for it. But the animation it was done before. So
yeah.
I don't know. Just it's one of those weird things. It's one of those things that's just oddly satisfying on that movie. It is the soundtrack.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree. The music is great. Honestly, I don't know how much more is there. Do you want us to talk about this specific segment?
When we covered the movie, I mean, like the movie, breaking it down into three pieces made more sense than kind of overarching it as a whole, because it is three different shorts, so each has a section of storytelling, has action, then you move on to the second part, storytelling, action, and like the third part, although it is kind of weak compared to the first two, same thing, storytelling, action. It's all it all just it all makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, I think it's done.
Yeah, I mean, just because I want to give my final thoughts on this, like on the movie as a whole, like I said, very great animation. The action is great. Whether it's like the fight that stood out to me the most, which is like the Greymon and Paramon fight, you still get some cool stuff with later on with the Avoromon or the Kokomon stuff. Even though the first short is lacking, it's still interesting in its own way. I mean, you know, like I've said with this, even though I technically have more nostalgia for Pokemon, and it's the one that I'm more familiar with of the two franchises, I'm willing to concede that at least this movie versus the ones that it was, you know, going off of around the same time, and maybe even most of the Pokemon movies, honestly, I haven't seen most of them anyways. It is a lot better and it's easier to grasp it, even if you're not a fan. Some of it is a bit too weird just because some of it will make you feel like you're watching like an abridged version of it. But I don't know, that stuff is still fine for me. Yeah, I would say for anyone who's watching this who hasn't seen it before, go watch it on YouTube. You know, I would say watch it in some official capacity, but that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. I don't know, maybe we can get Disney to actually put it on Disney Plus or something. I don't know. But yeah, go watch it. I'm interested in someday watching the original versions of this. I don't know if those are as hard or easier to find, but just watching this specific version, it still works fine. But yeah, that's pretty much my thing on it. Just it's a fun little movie. Even if you're not a big fan of Digimon, you'll probably enjoy it.
Well, my take on it, like I said at the beginning of this, is it's again my all-time favorite animated movie. Like oddly enough, you know, again, I grew up with Pokemon and you know, I mean, Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh, you know, all the stuff that I grew up with, and yet somehow I still somehow managed to pick this as my favorite movie, even without breaking down all the parts. And again, the ending not as strong. But if you haven't seen this movie, it is definitely worth a watch. I think the movie overall is just a great movie. It works with what they show us. It is, I think, in my opinion, it is worth a watch. You know, it's worth a watch for you to take the time and kind of go back and I don't know. For somebody who's seen it before, watch it again, relive it, because there are pieces that the movie that I haven't that I don't remember. Just, you know, over time you just forget. And then if you haven't seen the movie, it is definitely worth a watch just to kind of get a look at the animation style, the storytelling. I don't know. Again, it is one of my favorite movies, and I do enjoy it. I'm thankful that you took the time to watch it with me and to talk about it.
All right. So yeah, with that, I just want to say for all those listening, thank you for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you want to support me even more, there's also Patreon. You can always just support me with $1, with whatever amount you want. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're helping out, it's all good. So that's through patreon.com/psychams. John, I don't know if you want to promote anything, or I don't know if you got anything to promote.
I'm not as cool as you are, so no. Maybe one day.
All right.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
Inspire. So maybe one day. I do thank you for having me on your podcast. I mean, I've been looking forward to it all week, and even prior to this, like I know we've talked about other films, and I do want to do other projects with you. But this is my first time doing anything like this, so A, I was a little nervous, and B, it's fun. So I do look forward to the next time we can work together again.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well. So yeah, Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time.
Close to him? Close to who?
He's in America.
He doesn't even have a green card.